All right, well, we are going to get started. It's 12:10 and we want to have a good solid sort of 45 minutes to meet and have hear some great presentations and have a few minutes for conversation. And so thanks everyone for being here. We have one presenter, Jess is on Zoom, and but we've got our other four presenters up here at the table. So I think we're just going to dive in. And I think maybe I'll just say, you know, we had a really fascinating 3-hour conversation yesterday with the House Judiciary Committee with a number of the providers and a number of other players, including DOC and many others, about this sort of same conversation. But today's sort of a quick snapshot around who's providing community-based services to justice-involved women, and what are those programs while incarcerated, inside the facility, outside the facility, and you know what are the gaps? We know this is an area that's really important for future investments, and just trying to understand the landscape better and understand particularly where there's probably not equitable access to some of these programs geographically or otherwise. So that's what our presenters have been asked to sort of give 5-minute quick presentations on, and I'm going to turn it over and you all can introduce yourselves as you go. I think you're actually in the right order, although Jess, I think we'll slip in there.
We'll slip in there. Yeah.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Representative Dolan for this wonderful, nourishing lunch, as well as Elle, who baked the bread. And so I'm just really grateful. Thank you.
Yes, and guests are welcome to help yourselves.
Thank you. The cookies are gluten-free. I'll share.
Thank you. Well, it's wonderful to be with you all today. Sarah Robinson, I'm the Deputy Director at the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. And I just wanted to note, my colleague Kylan is on Zoom. Hello, Kylan is actually at the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility, where she works most days. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about our relationship with that facility and our relationship with incarcerated women and the services that are available to them in facility and also in the community. So many of you probably know the Vermont Network as the coalition of direct services organizations that provides resources and support to victims of domestic and sexual violence in communities across the state. We have 15 member organizations. They're all independent nonprofit organizations, but together they serve the entirety of the state and offer services like a 24-hour emergency helpline. Last year, 23,000 calls were made to that helpline. They also provide emergency and transitional housing, as well as advocacy to survivors who are navigating they're making decisions about their next steps and their safety. But in addition to supporting those 15 organizations across the state, we also operate a few direct services statewide organization programs. And one of them is Discussing Intimate Violence and Accessing Support, which is a program operated out of the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility that Kylan is the director of, and Divas, as it is known, provides support and advocacy to victims of domestic and sexual violence who are themselves incarcerated. And I think that I always like to just pause for a moment after that, because so often we think about victims of domestic or sexual violence as people who are not incarcerated, or the people who commit those offenses being the ones who are incarcerated. But the reality is, for justice-involved women, their experience of trauma and their likelihood of justice involvement are connected. And we typically think about that as what we call the trauma to prison pipeline. We estimate, and the national statistics would bear out, that the vast majority of women who are incarcerated in Vermont and across the country are themselves victims of domestic and sexual violence and have experienced intimate partner violence or sexual harm at some point in their lifetime. And often those experiences are related to their ultimate involvement with the justice system. So Divas has been operating in the Chittenden facility, or actually wherever the women have been, for over 20 years. As you know, they've been moved around the state a bit. And we have 2 staff people that are in the facility every day. Kylan's one of them. We also have another, our colleague Molly, who is also there. And I'm going to hand it over to Kylan just to talk a little bit about the kind of support that's provided by the Divas team in the facility.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Kylan. So yeah, I'm the director of the Divas program. I'll talk a little bit about what the services look like in the facility, and I can talk about what it looks like out of the facility as well. Thank you for the intro, Sarah. Yeah, so it's me and my other coordinator, Molly Milliken, and we provide services here for 40 hours a week for anyone who's interested. All of our programming is totally voluntary and totally confidential. Being a part of the Vermont network, being advocates against domestic and sexual violence, we have something called victim crisis worker privilege. So we have the highest level of confidentiality in the building. So people who come to our office can talk about really anything that's going on for them. And this provides a really safe space for people to maybe start exploring some of the things that they haven't talked to other providers about or feel vulnerable about. Obviously, this is like a really stressful building. You're being housed with people that you don't know, trying to understand the experience of being incarcerated, all of the trauma that goes with it can be really isolating and really scary. So we try and provide as much confidentiality and safety in here as we can. That looks on a daily basis like a lot of one-on-one sort of like emotional support, talking to people about their experiences, helping people process it, talking about mindfulness and coping skills, educating people on what domestic violence and sexual violence might look like, all its kind of different iterations, what experiences might look more like coercive control or maybe even human trafficking. And then from there, we help people sort of get through the experience of being here. And then when they're closer to leaving, talking about like, what are the safety skills that you need to be able to re-enter your community safely and ideally not have to ever return to an incarcerative setting. So that might look like safety planning, getting them connected to one of those 15 member organizations, making other referrals, and coordinating with the other providers in the building who you'll hear from everybody else here as well. But also, human trafficking case managers, their local programs, food stamps, job applications. Really, like we try to give people as much as we can before they're out the door. And then in the days that I'm not here, so I'm here twice a week, Molly's here 3 days a week on our opposite schedules. We're available to folks in the community, just navigating those barriers to reintegrating. If there are safety concerns that arise, we are accessible to them in the days that we are not here. Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. We also do, support groups in here. We do special events for domestic and sexual violence awareness months. We've had guest speakers come in. We also have partnered with Kids Apart a lot in the last couple of years to help moms connect with their children through art groups. We've had people come in and help us write lullabies that the moms can send home to their children. It's a really special program and a really special place to work.
Thanks, Kevin. So that's a little bit about the network and our relationship with Justice Involved Women and the Chittenden Regional Correctional Facility. And just to say that we really do this work only because of and in partnership with the other providers that are also at the facility. So I'm happy to hand it over to Ronnie.
Yes. And before you start,
Yeah.
can I just jump in? I should have said this at the beginning, but I just want to make it clear, and Isaac's in the room, so I haven't even talked with you about this yet, but we hope to have a separate Women's Caucus meeting where we get an update about the women's facility and have a conversation about that. And today was more designed about sort of community support programs. So just wanted to acknowledge that, and thanks for being here. You'll see.
Well, and thank you to Sarah and to you all for hearing more from us today. But I'm Ronnie Basden. I'm the executive director at Vermont Works for Women. And for a handful of you, you've already seen this paperwork, so you can happily pass it on to the person next to you. But this is a lot more detailed than what I will share today. Vermont Works for Women is an economic justice organization that has been serving Vermont since 1987, really trying to directly support women to economically viable pathways for support and independence, confidence building, and empowerment. We've also been a contracted partner with the Department of Corrections since 2001 in the facility providing employment readiness, whether that was hands-on building modular homes, whether it is employment readiness skills, running the vocational training programs that are available to us in the facility, and also running the in-facility jobs program for women. We have 2 full-time staff members that are in the facility during the week supporting women on a spectrum of different employment readiness pathways and support, while also trying to set goals with women about what does that look like as they re-enter into their communities. How can you take some of the skills that you've learned in the facility and transfer those into really viable pathways for jobs that are in demand across Vermont right now? And so we also have very robust community-based programs. And a lot of our community-based programs really try to address both sides of the issue. One, supporting women, justice-involved women, and women across the state in job training skills, certification programs, employment readiness, confidence building, whatever that might be, to prepare you or to help you navigate getting into these job fields. But we also really try to work on the other side of it with employers and with state agencies and with communities to better understand the challenges and barriers, one, for women in entering some of these fields, but also more specifically for justice-involved women. What does it mean to come out of incarcerated setting and to be successful in employment? And it's not a one-size-fits-all. It is very independent. And for Vermont Works for Women, while we have phenomenal community-based programs, our services for justice-involved women accessing those programs are not highly funded. And so it very becomes a lot of individual staff work to try to find women as they leave the facility, connect them to programming that makes sense. And it also becomes very county and resource specific. So it is a lot of work to say what works maybe in Addison County won't necessarily translate into Bennington County. And so it is very difficult to have a continuity of programming or even a continuity of success from the amazing work that we're able to do in the facility to then really translate that into supporting women to find success in the community. And that's one of the hopes that Vermont Works for Women has, is to really better fund our community-based programs for justice-involved women so there can be that continuity of support, knowing that employment success is an absolute indicator of individual success and reintegration. And so we really try to focus on that. I really quickly will mention, we are in partnership with Department of Corrections on a 3-year pilot program that's focused on employment readiness after reentry. This has been a very large learning lesson for Vermont Works for Women as we navigate all of the challenges that come with reentering. And just a job offer and just a safe place to live are not a solve to a woman being fully successful after incarceration. And so we have 2 years left on that pilot to really try to navigate gaps in service, gaps in opportunity. As we all know, mental health and substance abuse is a big challenge. Housing is a phenomenally large challenge for any Vermonter, let alone a woman coming out of incarceration. And so these are the ways that our organization tries to better support, tries to provide a safety net, and tries to provide opportunity for justice-involved women. And I don't know if Jess is coming in between us or if
Like Jess to go next.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Jess, you're up.
Okay, let me just. Hello, thanks for letting me join by Zoom today. My name is Jess Kell, and I'm here representing Lund, where I've served as the Kids Apart Parenting Program Coordinator for 16 years. The mission of Lund is to help children thrive by empowering families to break cycles of poverty, addiction, and abuse. Kids Apart specifically seeks to reduce the traumatic impact of parental incarceration on children and families. This particular program, which has provided facility-based parenting services since 2003, is effective in that DOC invests in Lund's family-centered and trauma-informed services to be delivered within the facility. In evaluating where we may find a lack of equity and access to services, we'd like to focus in on those individuals who are not currently incarcerated and are at the intersections of substance use disorder, the criminal justice system, and disruption to family units. These women and their families are located in each county of Vermont. A first Kids Apart appointment in the facility will usually reveal a complex history of trauma and the resulting barriers which have consequentially arisen. Each story is heartbreaking. The overlap of substance use disorder, housing insecurity, unemployment, coercion and exploitation, and mental health challenges leave people feeling disempowered and hopeless. Expectations and goals set by service providers may feel impossible to achieve, including those goals which are imperative if she has any chance to reunify with her children. Once she becomes incarcerated or reincarcerated, those hopes diminish significantly. If she has stable housing, it's almost certainly gone. When released to the community without a continuum of services, she'll be back to square one on virtually every wait list. As we explore women's pathways to incarceration, the question arises of what impact earlier access to targeted and specific services may have on them and their children. We know that prevention and front-loading services reduces the need for high-end and costly systems such as incarceration. If she had access to the same family-centered case management in the community from her first involvement with the criminal justice system, might she and her children have different outcomes? We ask you to consider that as one of Vermont's designated parent-child centers, Lund's Kids Apart program, Lund, and our Kids Apart program are uniquely situated to provide you expertise as you explore how increased and targeted preventative services in the community help address some of the critical needs of justice-involved women and their families, which could be a critical alternative to building a larger women's facility where there's a likelihood that Vermont will see increased numbers of incarcerated women. These are some of the most vulnerable families in the state of Vermont, and yet our current services for them are designated to respond to critical incidents rather than offer supports earlier on, which may help avoid further trauma that is then compounded across generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
The babies.
I know, I love the children's noises. Noise.
Yeah, I am doing double duty today as I speak to you. I have a little visitor in the next few minutes.
Well, thanks. I think we're generally holding questions for a few minutes, so I hope you can stay on, but if not, we understand too. Turn over to Lisa.
Thank you. So hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Falcone. I'm the Executive Director of Mercy Connections, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. I've been coming on Zoom, so I literally felt, oh, I'm breaking out and coming here in person. So it's really delightful to meet you all in person. Before I talk about what we do in justice, let me just say a few things about Mercy Connections. We are a center located in Burlington, Vermont. We're an education, social justice, multicultural learning center, and our focus really is on bringing people, not just women coming out of incarceration, but marginalized Vermonters back to a place of agency for themselves, revealing their promise. And that's what we do in our center in Vermont, in Burlington. Throughout our organization, we lead with the premise that all Vermonters, regardless of their circumstances, deserve dignity, respect, compassion, and the opportunity to pursue their purpose and promise. Some of you know that we evolved out of Trinity College. We were founded by the Sisters of Mercy, and I only bring that up because today I want to talk about our Vermont Women's Mentoring Program, which is our justice program. I'm joined by Kelly Moran. And Kelly, can you turn on your camera? Are you there, my friend? So Kelly is back at our center in Burlington because today is the day that we do what we call community lunch. And community lunch is our way of bringing people together to take a pause, to build community. And we have women who have, we have all kinds of people there, but Kelly's there holding down the fort to greet some of the women who may be coming for lunch and other services. I also believe that Lund is a guest at our place today. So the interconnection between our organizations is real and very important. So overall in our organization last year, we served 800 people. I just want to mention that we represented, people came from 35 different countries of origin and spoke 23 different languages. So that's the kind of place that we're running. In terms of the mentoring program, Kelly is working inside the women's facility on a daily basis, and she provides individual support to the women, finding working with them to encourage them to think about mentoring and mentorship as a way to move themselves forward. In addition, we run classes within the women's facility. And it's sort of fitting that I come here and perhaps before you too, Jana, but our focus is really on that sense of the whole person. And we start with the idea that we're trying to help them build a sense of confidence, a sense of hope, a sense of promise so that they can move forward, whether it be through employment. And that is so critical for the women we serve. We're focused on these building skills, a personal sense of value that really help prepare the women for life after incarceration. So let me just tell you that our program trains, recruits, trains, supports, and matches volunteers. So we have a cadre of women volunteers who are well-trained and serve as mentors, ongoing mentors, both within the women's correctional facility and once they come out into community. These trained women volunteers are truly a lifeline for the women, both in the facility and as they rebuild their lives. Our program is restorative. It offers a framework of for trauma-affected women to spend time with a healthy companion. This positive social capital leads to a greater sense of belonging, healthier choices, and reduced recidivism. We know that. That's what it shows in this research. So some trends that we have been seeing at Mercy Connections, both in the facility and since with people we see coming out, we're just seeing an increasing number of people, what we call our alumni, people who have maybe been out for a long time, coming back to us and to use our services. And to say that they're desperate is probably an understatement. We've become a primary resource for helping to find safe housing for women who are homeless. We began an essentials program that we call the Dignity Program. It's sort of our inside language that distributes food cards, hygiene products, phones, and clothing. We also provide individual assistance in filling out forms for benefits and services. In addition, we welcome people to join our community meals like it's going on today. And all our free classes that we offer, there's literally, close to, well over 50 things that people can participate in at our center. And we also are now offering things online because so many women are being released throughout the state and they take advantage of that. I just want to note that most of our work, other than the contract that we have to be inside the facility, is privately funded. This is all funded by our generous donors and other grants. The challenges we see are lack of housing, creating obstacles for people to get those supports. We see people returning to places that are not safe and encouraging old habits that perhaps are not healthy and not a way for them to move forward. We are seeing a changing profile of the women who are entering prison. And in the words of my dear friend Kelly over there, there is more complex mental health, as we all know very well. And there's also a whole new world of drugs. And that's probably what we're seeing more on the outside than the inside. We also see the vulnerability of people being extraordinary. We're seeing an increase in trafficking of women, and you all were talking about that beforehand. As for inside the facility, you've heard this number before, 50% of people are detainees. They are not yet sentenced. And from Kelly's perspective, and she may want to speak to this, that puts them in a very vulnerable place, and the fear is so real. So we, Kelly and mentors going in the facility really are focused, and our classes are really focused on, again, giving people that sense of hope, things are going to be okay, because that's where they are at that point in time. Some things that we started offering during the pandemic, we'd love to see. These are basic needs that people could use more of: backpacks, hygiene products, clothes, phones, mentors, certificates for classes in prison. We do that And one of my instructors was saying that for them to receive a certificate is like an accomplishment, and it seems so minor, but it might be the first time that they've received something like that in their entire lives. So it really is meaningful. We focus on building a sense of hope, and anything we can do to raise that is what we focus on at Mercy Connection. So that's a bit about our programs. I do have things if anybody's interested in our materials. Happy to send them around. And I'll send it to you, Jana.
So I have a little presentation, but obviously time is limited, so we won't get to it all, but I'll just put it up for folks to look at, and I can also email. So my name is Jana Ossoff. I'm the Vermont Free Her Campaign Director, the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. For folks that don't know, we're a campaign of the council, and our goal is to end the incarceration of women, girls, trans, and non-binary people. So we're an advocacy group and come to this conversation a bit differently than the direct service providers. So I'll be sharing a bit about where we feel there should be investments and about bills that we've been working on with Representative Chyna that help show us where these investments should be and envision a world beyond prisons. So I'll be quick, but to start, we have H445, which folks may have heard of. We introduced it last session, and that's essentially the prison moratorium bill and would place a pause on the study, design, acquisition, construction of any new prison for 5 years. It's important to note it does not stop repairs or maintenance and allows for renovations as long as they don't increase bed counts. This bill also proposes to end the period of suspension of state aid for school construction projects, which I believe was lifted last session, but correct me if I'm wrong. With this legislation, it's our hope that as we pause prison construction, we can dig more deeply into these conversations about what community services need to be expanded on and more heavily funded. I know there will be a separate session on the prison, but I do just want to share that with the estimated cost of the prison being slated to be $70 to $100 million. And if we divide that by the current population of folks in CRCF, which is 110 people, we're spending around $600,000 to $900,000 per person. And that's really an astronomical amount that we could be spending on centers or services that really approach these problems from a housing first angle and really treat the underlying issues that lead to incarceration. And then in with that, we call it the twin bills. We wanted to present not just a problem, but a solution. And H438 would create a working group of directly impacted people, stakeholders, and other experts to develop a plan to replace the state's prisons with a public system of community supports grounded in restorative justice principles. So while we pause the prison construction, we can see what this group comes up with. And something advocates have been talking about for a while is implementing some kind of system that is a diverse continuum of housing with varying options for supports and wraparound services. And ideas like this really help us see how we've been approaching support in our society with a one-size-fits-all approach. And this really isn't working. Some people need help with everyday things to keep them from falling through the cracks. And that's our hope with creating more supportive housing options. So moving on to some of the bills introduced this session. H814 provides grant funds for community-based services that provide supportive and transitional housing to individuals who are homeless or at risk of homelessness and who are justice involved. So for folks that were there yesterday and maybe tuned in, we have heard not just only Free Her, but other folks that women are being held because they don't have a residence and other people are released unhoused. And I'm sure you all agree this is a really urgent issue. And once again, quoting from yesterday, in 2018 alone, 127 people throughout all our state prisons were being held due to lack of residence. And then we just heard through letters and other correspondence with women incarcerated in CRCF that people are waiting sometimes up to 12 months waiting for housing to be released from prison. And then H815 establishes a pilot for the provision of community-based mental health and substance use disorder treatment services for detained or incarcerated individuals and individuals re-entering the community. we believe incarcerated people deserve to see their community providers while incarcerated. And this bill also attempts to aid in that difficult transition between incarceration and re-entering where Medicaid hasn't quite kicked in. So people are stuck without their prescriptions, aren't able to schedule appointments and things like that. And this really helps us look at this uncomfortable intertwining of corrections with support services. And we feel that social services should start to be exported out of the prison system. And as providers continue to remind us that the programming stops right when they leave the prisons, and sometimes that's when most of the vulnerability begins. So we hope that we can fund community-based solutions so Vermonters don't need to go to prison and end up with records to receive the services they need. And then quickly, we'll probably talk about this later, but one of the central messaging at Free Her is that incarceration is inherently harmful. And regardless of what folks think about the necessity of prisons, we really are trying to share the message that there's no such thing as trauma-informed prisons. And we even heard earlier in January from the mental health systems director for the Department of Corrections during the joint testimony with House Corrections and the House Healthcare Committee that incarceration's harmful. And then when you look at national studies like the American Public Health Association, they agree and have some disturbing facts like incarcerated people have a higher prevalence of acute and chronic health conditions than the general US population. This includes higher rates of HIV and other infectious diseases, mental health diagnoses, hypertension, diabetes, asthma, stroke, along with overall lower life expectancy. And these higher rates of chronic conditions among incarcerated people have been attributed to incarceration itself, as well as pre-incarceration exposures such as poverty, houselessness, and racism. So I'm not sure where I am with my time, but I would just like to bring this all together and share that if we were to pick like the 3 top things we think folks should focus on funding, it would definitely be continuing to expand the services of our direct care providers and CRCF, along with community justice centers. They do tremendous work around diversion. Some folks can do transitional housing and other programming that really helps people that are justice involved. Also expanding that supportive and transitional housing and focusing on peer support and case management. So I will end there. So time for questions.
Yeah, I think we have like 5 or 6 questions, and just really appreciate all of our presenters for being here and doing this thing. It's a big topic. We haven't even touched the prison piece. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a question. Molly Burke from Brattleboro, and a longtime member of the Women's Caucus, and this has been an issue that's followed us for many years, but it's such an impressive presentation here with all of you working this issue, and hopefully bend the curve a bit. Thank you very much.
Hi, Edie Branning, Jericho. So a theme that I keep honing in on this session is how many great nonprofits we have doing the work of government. And I'm really struck by that, especially today. And I'm just trying to get my brain around that fact and how it could work differently, or is it the best way to do things in our, and I don't know that it's a question that anybody can answer today, but I feel like that's the underpinning of I mean, this, like how many agencies, how many groups, and how do we provide the right support at the right times when it's all piecemeal? And so that's my question, statement, comment. I don't know what it is.
Thought on that I'm happy to just offer, which is that, I think you're highlighting, it's a great question, and I don't have an answer to it. However, I do think that one of the things that has been highlighted in this work, and I also just want to note, I know the Department of Corrections is here, and just want to say that as providers in the facility, we truly see the Department of Corrections as a key partner and an equal partner in the provision of services. And I believe that there is truly a shared commitment to improving outcomes for justice-involved women between the nonprofit partners and the Department of Corrections. And it does create a patchwork of services. So we're able to both leverage expertise like the amazing economic development and employment expertise of Vermont Works for Women, the domestic and sexual violence and trauma-informed services, types of expertise that the network and our member organizations bring. And at the same time, I think that it really does highlight the places where, especially in the reentry context, and as women are leaving the facility, there are a lot of gaps that justice-involved women are finding themselves needing to navigate without as many resources. And one of the things that our kind of providers we have all said together is, if we're making investments in resources and services in the facility, we need to be making commensurate investments in the community, because it is a setup for people to receive services in the facility and then leave and have these incredible gaps that they're navigating. So I think that that's definitely one area for us all to be working in partnership around kind of what the immediate transition and what the long-term transition is looking like in terms of community-based services.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as a person who worked in reentry with a community justice center before I came to office, which was like 3 years ago, I only worked with one woman who had been incarcerated. Almost all of the population I worked with were men, but I was super impressed with, I mean, almost everybody that spoke. Your agency checked in with me when I had this woman coming down from CRCF, and it was great. And I think it's something that we need to think about in terms of our men are not getting those supports. I mean, I think my guess is most of the women's agencies would say we need more to adequately serve the needs of the women. And the men have less than half, probably a quarter of the services. Like, I've been trying so hard in the corrections committee to try and make a family-friendly visit policy so that dads can meet their kids in a fraction of the way that women are able to meet their kids in the women's facility. And so just sort of food for thought. I know we don't have time to dive into it, but there's so much work to do in terms of improving the system that we have and all of the people that are served within it. But thank you to those of you that are working on behalf of the women, because you really have a much better system. And I know the individual that I worked with was super grateful for the help that she got when she was inside.
Any other questions?
I have a thought, again, not a question, but it's sort of what you were saying as well, Edie, that what's really impressive, and that's one adjective, but the coordination that you're describing between and among your organizations is really incredible to me. And I think about the extra work that must require, and maybe now it's like second nature to all of you, but I don't know, maybe not, but I imagine it's vitally important. And the fact that you're doing it is probably more than we can say for so many state agencies, that you have this, it sounds like really great communication and coordination. That's encouraging. And again, it's still, I would love to see all of this work being done with more reliable funding sources and more prevention, more focused on prevention and pre-incarceration. And I for some reason, the analogy of middle school jumped to my mind, because I think of like my kids' experience in our K-12 system and how K-4 was like amazing, all these supports, so like maybe that's actually while you're incarcerated. And then middle school is like that transition. We just don't do transitions very well. And like these supports get pulled out from under people, and then we're surprised at what happens in the next few years. Like, we should not be surprised.
Well, and I was also going to say too, to that, the coordination, while yes, it might add time, but it's of huge value, I think, to each organization to know one organization can't solve it all. And you have to have lanes that you approach this work in to provide that holistic. But we also know, as a coordinated approach, we're poised and ready to do more. I think during the pandemic, it was really highlighted. A lot more women were released into the community. This group came together, there was funding available, and it did phenomenal things. And so to be able to get back to that and to know that there already is a return on the investment, and we can prove that even in that short blip of time, but that it is possible, and it's possible, yesterday, it can happen immediately. And it does become more difficult, to be fair, for our community-based programs. Private funders also recognize this, and it becomes very difficult to continue to go back for the same funding when they're like, when does it come from the state at some point? So it's a question happening on both sides too.
May I also add that when you think about incarceration and their mission, it really is about public safety. It's a level of putting people, that was the decision. We all are mission-driven organizations that are about advancing and mostly in women, but we do work with men as well on a small level, just so you know that. So that makes our missions compatible in a way that, here at Mercy Connections, we often say, if not Mercy Connections, then who? And when I'm working with this group of women and others, that's just the way it is. We know that we have to be the people out there because there is not really a government support system that can catch these women after they're released. So.
And I don't mean to imply that government could do it better.
Sure,
either.
no. But so it just makes sense that we're all, because our missions are so aligned, which is a difference.
I feel like a big part of, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Thank you very much. I've learned so much today. I'm curious, housing was a big thing for all of you. Who are your housing partners on the ground?
I can say one thing though about that. So housing has, I think we were all part of the Northern Lights, which was a house in Burlington, and there were some decisions made to defund that house. And so there have been some decisions made at the state level to put people in scattered housing. So housing partners are people in my world, working with CVOEO, COTS, all of the places that do housing as their primary place. But to deliver services and to find women once they're released without a centralized house that provides wraparound supports, it's really difficult. We see women who have been scattered and put in scattered housing come to us because scattered housing is important, obviously. But housing without services, when you're at sort of your lowest point, it makes it really difficult to move forward. You have started the Bean Project.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, often, knowing that 80 to 90% or upwards of the women that we're incarcerating in Vermont are victims of domestic and sexual violence, sometimes there's opportunities for those individuals to go into our shelter system across the state. But our domestic violence shelters in Vermont are full. And they have been full for many, many years. And and there's significant backlogs there. And so to be frank, a lot of women end up in the motel and hotel system. That is the safety net that exists right now. And it is very less than ideal.
And similar to domestic violence shelters, transitional housing units are full. Jenna's Promise, Dismissed House, any of the ones that are established that are still in existence, they're full. And also begging for support services. It is a very much one-on-one relationship with landlords, and that is extremely difficult. Vermont Works for Women did try to tackle the housing and did run a housing unit last year. And when I tell you, it is a bigger problem than ever anticipated. That is a story for another day, but it's a very, very big challenge. And add justice involved to it, add mothers, add employment. It's layered. It's very nice.
I think we need to wrap up.
There are a couple people, I don't know if you want to.
Oh, gosh. Jess, go ahead. Yeah, just 30 seconds.
I very, very quickly, I just wanted to add on as well that for a lot of survivors of violence that are being held here on a lack of housing or need a residence to go to, and shelters are full and hotels are not an option, and there's a backlog for any sort of program like that, a lot of people will end up choosing to return to an unsafe situation or an abuser to be able to be back and closer to family, and the option to obviously not be incarcerated anymore. We have a lot of people who end up making decisions to be out of here, which is understandable, that end up putting them in more harm's way when they're leaving.
Yeah, thanks for that. Sorry. Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, and just a reminder that 75 to 80% of incarcerated women are mothers of minor children. So when we look at any consideration of services in a community for justice-involved women, it has to be gender responsive and take that into consideration. What would work for folks that don't have children, just a very small percentage, does not work for mothers in this state.
Thanks. Well, a conversation to be continued. Did you want to say anything before we wrap up?
No, just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having
Thank
us.
you.
Great meeting. Thank you, Carrie, for hosting.
Yeah. Good job. Yes, I know.